My name is Stephanie Hancock. I'm here because at one time I was the founder of a paranormal investigation group in Ohio called Roseville Investigations of the Paranormal, or RIP.
I love it. How did it come to be?
I mean, if we want to go way back, it started when I was very young. I lived in a house in Ohio that anytime I slept in my grandmother's room, I would hear spurs. And if I looked over the bed, I would see like cowboy boots with spurs on it, a gun holster, and a hat. And I always just thought I was dreaming. And then years later, I was living next to a museum that was all about the Civil War, because I lived in an area of Ohio that was part of the Underground Railroad. So very, very Yankee. And I was telling the person that in the museum about the ghost I used to see, and she said that was a general. So she looked up the house that I lived in when I was very young, and it turned out that house actually belonged to General Sherman before my family lived there. So we believed that he was visiting the house, and I saw him as a youth. And then I started actually doing paranormal research on my own about 15 years old. And this is back in the 90s, before any of those TV shows were around. So we were just going into abandoned houses, going into graveyards, being chased by rednecks and pickup trucks with shotguns. Not the safest thing because, the shows didn't normalize it yet. And then when I actually started a group officially, I was much older, and this was about after the shows had started, I think. And a couple of my friends liked the shows, and I was telling them, I'm like, oh, well, I know a real graveyard that every time I go there, something creepy happens. And it doesn't matter what time of the day is. If you're in the graveyard, you will hear somebody chopping wood. It can be early in the morning, it can be late at night, but you will hear somebody chopping wood. And you step out of the graveyard, you won't hear anything. And the guys didn't believe me, so we drove out to the middle of no man's land in Ohio and took them to this little graveyard. And you wouldn't even know that there was a graveyard there if you'd never been there, because it's just 4 or 5 tombstones that you can't even read anymore, and there's just a little bitty sign that somebody made out of 2 sticks and some 2x4s. But sure enough, we go back in there and you start hearing somebody chopping wood. And the guys kind of freak out a little bit, but they're still kind of making fun of me. And this was in the middle of July. And I remember it was so hot and it was so muggy on our drive out there that we had the AC on full blast. And we're standing in the graveyard and we all just get cold. And we look at each other and we can see our breaths. And finally, I'm just like, oh no, we need to go. We need to go right now. So we all get back in my car. We start driving away. And AC is not on. And you can still see our breaths in the car. And the guys that were with me are freaking out because they just cannot believe the experiences that we were having. And that's what started our group. Because the 2 guys that were with me, one, my ex-husband, and then his best friend. And his best friend was super, super religious, super Christian. And he could not believe what he had just experienced. And then my ex-husband was all about disproving things. So that's how we started our little group, and we just kind of grew from there for a couple years, and then we dissolved.
So, in your experience, what kind of entities do you encounter during an investigation? We've had previous episodes about things like demons and the such. Have you ever seen anything to that extreme, or have you ever seen anything varying just between seeing a regular spirit and maybe just something that's something else?
Well, I would say most of the time, we don't see anything. A lot of the hauntings that we investigated were really bad wiring. These are very old Victorian houses. But with that being said, we did have a couple places that definitely had some crazy activity. And the way I see things are not what most people talk about seeing. For me, I don't really see shadow people. Even though I did one time, I had an astral critter that followed me home, and that was pretty freaky. But most of the time when I see something, I'm still awake. I'm still aware of my surroundings, but everything goes dark. And then I start seeing flashes in my mind's eye. And it's kind of like watching a movie. So the first time this actually happened to me, I was probably about 16. And we were investigating an abandoned duplex with a downstairs and an upstairs. And the downstairs was completely gutted. There's nothing in this place. Even the wallpaper's been stripped off the walls. And we kind of joke around and walk around the inside. And then we decide we're going to go upstairs. And the group I was with, we kind of noticed that you could see things through the windows. Like you could see curtains and you could see a couch and a table and a lamp. And then all of a sudden, I stopped seeing the house and started seeing flashes. And it was flashes of there was a girl and I could hear a baby crying, and then there was a knock on the door, and the girl goes over to the door and she like kind of peeks out, but it's not the person that she was hoping it was. And then there's a struggle. Somebody burst in, and I never see the faces, but I'm seeing like body parts, arms like fighting each other. And the entire time there's this baby screaming, and I see clothes flying through the air. And then I kind of come back to, and my friend said I was just standing there, just staring like at nothing. I really freaked out. I made them take me back to their apartment, but their curiosity got the best of them. So they went back to the house without me. And they went upstairs and they saw that upstairs, like I said, the downstairs completely got nothing in there, no furniture, no nothing. Upstairs was still fully furnished. There was still food in the fridge. There was still food in the cupboard. There were baby clothes thrown everywhere. There actually was police tape on the door that they had to kind of break through. And then they brought me back a journal that they had found that belonged to the girl. And it was a girl talking about a custody struggle with her baby's dad. So we don't know what happened to the girl. We tried to find her off the little bit of information I had from the journal. Wasn't really able to find anything that happened to her, but something definitely happened to her, something bad. And so when I see things, that's kind of how I see them.
How I see things, when I see ghosts or spirits or something that resides in the astral realm, the best way I could say it, it's like 2 layers of transparency on top of each other. You know how like back in the day when they used to have the overhead projectors in class and they had that transparent sheet of paper and you could layer them to make an image? It's like that for me. Like I can see reality and whatever's beyond that veil at the same time. And it's like the veil is extremely thin for me. Usually I see faces. I'll see them and I'll interact with them sometimes. Sometimes they talk to me, or sometimes they just look at me. I'll know. It's like a downloaded information. I'll just know what would happen. Everybody does it differently, and I really like hearing about that. But that's why I also hate ghost hunting shows, because I feel like it just adds to the stigma of people who actually do these things. You know what I mean? I kind of just feel like they make a mockery of us.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And just to kind of reiterate on what you were just saying, I did have an experience where a group and I were at this place called Memorial Hall, and it was a theater house. But before it was a theater house, back during World War I, they would send the bodies home to the people, the dead soldiers, and then their families would come to that building to collect the bodies. So they would be there a couple days waiting. So there was a lot of activity that happened at this place, a lot of violent activity. But what was interesting is I was walking past the stage and I was looking at one of my group members that was coming towards me. And I ducked down really fast because something came off the stage and was trying to grab me. So I saw in my mind's eye an apparition of what looked like a little old man in a frilly girl dress. So like a little girl that was just completely rotted away. But the guy that was walking towards me actually saw a light up on the stage. So he saw like a physical apparition, and then I saw it mentally. And we both reacted at the same time, and it was really kind of crazy. I actually have a picture from a different part of that theater shooting at the stage where in one picture there's nothing, and then the next picture there's a green orb. Not that I really trust orbs, but it's just kind of ironic that it was green, because usually with dust orbs you don't see colors, it's just white or gray.
Yeah. Besides like your own personal intuition and powers, what other kind of equipment would you use for ghost hunting?
So we had a digital voice recorder, a really nice one, not the most expensive, but also not just some cheap random recorder. That way we could try to get EVPs. I also had an EMF detector. I'm kind of a natural EMF detector myself, so if I notice that I'm starting to get a little nauseous, it's usually because of high EMF. And we would use that detector to help us locate maybe bad wiring, things like that. But also, supposedly, you can pick up on ghosts through high EMF. I used to have a Sony camcorder that was a high 8 film. And the reason why I'm being specific about the type of camera is that particular make and model did night vision, and it did night vision really, really well. And you can't even get night vision anymore on a camera. So it was really nice because we could actually turn off all the lights and you could look through the screen of the camera and you could watch it, and it was being put straight to film. So there was no chance of something being shadowed from a memory card or something like that. Unfortunately, that camera got destroyed during an investigation. We were at a place I'll talk about a little bit later if we have time. And this woman across the walkie started yelling at me, get in here now, get in here now. We need your camera. We have high activity. So I come running into the room she was in. I set my camera up. First thing she says was, if you're with us, drain the battery. And then instantly the battery went drained and that camera never worked again. I bought tons and tons of new batteries and it just never came back on.
Well, that's one hell of a way to send a message.
Oh, I was so mad at her. She was like a guest on our team, and her family was really bad because they like to invite harm. So they would ask things like that, like drain this other person's battery, or, oh, if you're here, hurt Stephanie, or...
Oh, hell no.
Yeah. They broke the golden rule too, where they were like, do you know that you're dead? And it's just like, oh God, you guys are amateurs. Why?
So were they like the type of people that would go out of the way to try to antagonize it to make it show activity?
They were all about provoking. Her main goal was to be on a TV show. That's the only reason why. So she wasn't about actually like learning or trying to collect data. She just wanted to be rich and famous.
I'm sorry, but if you tell a spirit to try to hurt somebody else or try to hurt me, I'm gonna punch a bitch. Look, my bark's worse than my bite, but don't pull that type of shit, because I will hurt somebody.
Other things that we used to use, I had a pendulum, and I wouldn't actually hold the pendulum because it can be influenced by your own body. So I had a stand. I would set the stand up, and then we'd have the pendulum, and then we would try to get them to move the pendulum, which never happened.
Did you guys ever use spirit boxes?
Yeah, we tried that a couple times, and I felt like the randomness of it was... Have you ever heard of the Matrix effect?
Something I was going to bring up.
If it's the same thing, because everybody kind of calls stuff differently. The Matrix effect is when you're looking for something, you're going to see something. So I feel like with spirit boxes, when it's just kind of going through and just grabbing those little audio clips from like the radio stations or frequencies, you're going to start putting things together. You're going to start hearing things.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to bring up, because I've always been incredibly skeptical of spirit boxes for that exact same reason.
Personally, when it comes to ghost hunting and bringing equipment like recorders and stuff like that, my thing is like, that's a waste of time, because you're not going to get anything. You're not. And that is a heavily biased opinion, because from what I understand, these things don't want to be recorded. Because once humans have that for certain knowledge like that, what do we do when we find out things? You know what I mean? We go and sometimes we destroy. I feel like it would just be innate. I mean, I know that like as a witch or somebody spiritual, we interact with the other side all the time, but there's certain levels to this shit. There's certain rules to this shit. And I feel like as humans, we would fuck it up. But I also feel like they're not going to go on screen and stuff like that, because a lot of these things, spirits and the astrals, sometimes they purposely feed off of certain things off of humans, right? Tragedy and stuff like that. And for demons or evil spirits, it's all about destroying your life and driving you to insanity. And when you see something that others can't see, it furthers that rabbit hole and it makes everybody around you more apprehensive of your sanity. So it's best for them to operate without us knowing and having that physical evidence.
I can see that. I also have kind of these two working theories, if you want to hear them, about what ghosts are?
Of course.
Okay. So one theory is kind of a basic one, and it's kind of like Lady in White. Spirits are basically a videotape that has been watched so many times that when you watch it, you're just seeing glimpses, and it's kind of been stretched and aged. So we're not even actually interacting with anything that's intelligent. We're just kind of seeing glimpses of something that happened in the area, and that area absorbed all of that energy, whether it's negative or positive. And then my other one, and this one's kind of out there. Basically, if you looked at a giant oak tree, okay, and then every branch of the oak tree is somebody's life, and then every twig is a moment in the person's life. Now, if you just imagine the wind coming through and blowing through that oak tree, you're going to see branches rubbing on each other. And when they rub on each other and the twigs are touching twigs, we're seeing glimpses into other people's lives in other time frames. So maybe there's a branch that happened in somebody's life from the 1800s, and then here we are in 2020, but the wind blows us together, and then all of a sudden they're seeing a glimpse into the future. To them, it looks like a ghost, and we're seeing a glimpse into the past, and to us, it looks like a ghost.
Time bending. I've heard of this before, that there's areas like the Bermuda Triangle. That's the most famous of like the 12 energy field points on Earth, but there's other energy field points, and that's supposedly the point that other universes collide with us. So that's why things happen in these areas. Sometimes you might end up on the wrong side of that and end up in 1952 instead of, present day. These are the type of conversations I love to get really stoned to and just like ponder the universe. I've also heard that people with mental illness are prime targets for evil spirits because they feed off of their sorrow and their pain, and that they worsen people who aren't getting treatment.
I don't necessarily think that they're being targeted just by evil spirits. I think that when we are very young, we're more susceptible to things. We're paying more attention to things. We don't let our adult mind kind of interrupt things. And people with mental health issues are kind of in the same boat. If you're really distraught, you're more likely to allow something else that's distraught come into your life, kind of like the misery loves company. I don't necessarily think that it's only evil. There's many cases of where they suspect somebody with autism sees ghosts. There's animals that they think see ghosts all the time. And again, it's that idea that you're just more open to the possibilities.
When you're in the field, when you're doing investigating, do you usually have a normal order of operations that you go through? Like, do you stake out the house first and then set up equipment, or what's your normal order of operations?
What I used to do was set up the investigation. Then we would research the house, the property, to find out if there was anything that happened before that the people got there, even maybe before the house was built. Then we would do a general walkthrough. We would look for things with all the lights on. We would take the EMF detector and try to find all the power sources. We would talk to the people that lived there, ask them what they were seeing, and then kind of get an idea where we wanted to go from there. If somebody was basically just seeing shadow people, we kind of knew that it was probably just bad wiring, or maybe they lived next to something that was putting off extreme amounts of EMF, like a TV station or a radio tower. If they were seeing something that was more kind of like demonic sounding, we might try it from a different approach. We might pay more attention to different things like smells. If we think that maybe they possibly have a poltergeist, we're going to look, are there any young females in the household? Because poltergeist, it's notorious to know that it's usually a young female that is distraught that's causing these things to happen. It doesn't always have to be a female, it could be a male, but it's just something that we would kind of look for. We'd also, for like poltergeist, you're looking for smells. They have a particular smell that kind of smells like cat urine. So if we're walking around the house in full light, do we smell anything? We would also do body checks with a video camera to see, does anybody have any cuts, scratches, marks on their body? And then later, if something happened, which actually happened during an investigation, we had the video footage beforehand. There was no marks on the person. And then later, the 3 marks that happened where they got grabbed in the arm by somebody.
Actually, that brings me onto a really good point. And that's what kind of dangers are you putting yourself at risk to when you go into a place that could be haunted? What risk is there?
There's definitely physical risk. My little sister went with me and she got grabbed, and we have actual pictures of welts on her arm that happened. There's emotional damage that can happen. You can definitely give yourself some trauma and you can go into shock. Also, spiritual wise, you can have things follow you home. I had an astro critter that followed me home that was harmless, and then another one that wasn't harmless. And we're pretty sure that he had evil intentions. And that scared the crap out of me.
Do you usually have a sort of method that you do once you wrap up to try to at least like cleanse things, to at least try to get them to lose your scent, like smudging and stuff like that?
No, I usually didn't do that because I didn't want to disturb anything that was going on. Just because there's something that's in the house doesn't necessarily mean that it's evil. And sometimes it's not our place to smudge and get rid of something. Now, if it was something that I felt was definitely not a positive influence, then we might try to take those steps. But it was always with permission of the person that owned the property.
See, I would never do ghost hunting like that. Half the time on my day-to-day life, I'm just like, whenever I see things, I'm like, fuck off, leave me alone.
I hardcore wanted to do that so badly when I was in high school. That's what I wanted to do as like my main thing in life.
I'm down to go check out creepy places just to check them out. Hey, this is how I am with shit. Don't fuck with me, I don't fuck with you. Because half the time when I'll see something, I'll just look at it and I'm just like, what's up? And then I'm like, all right, fuck off. Or sometimes I don't. I just side-eye it and I'm like, okay, whatever. I just do my thing because I don't want to be fucked with. Don't fuck with me. And that's just because I've just been seeing like this shit since I was a kid. I just don't have the time. I got things to do with my life. I have video games to play.
Well, I definitely go there with sort of the researcher's mentality and wanting to learn. But I stand with Stephanie. I don't want to piss it off. I don't want to ruin whatever's going on there. I definitely can get behind that. Sort of just show up, learn, and go home.
So what advice would you have for anybody who wants to become a paranormal investigator?
Get a tetanus shot.
I can see that.
Makes
I can see
sense.
that.
You definitely will need that. Make sure that wherever you're going, that people know that you're going there and that you're allowed to be there. You don't want to get chased off a property with shotguns. It's not fun. It's not safe. You know, keep an open mind. I always went into an investigation thinking that the claims were going to be false. That way I wasn't trying to put my own spin on something. Everything that you take, every picture, every audio recording, everything, log it. Do not throw it away, because you might see something the first time, and if you save one picture out of 50, in that 50 there might be something else that will tell you what that picture is. I can't show you, but I have a great picture. My sister freaked out because she thought she caught something that looked like demon eyes, and we just kept lightening the photo, and finally we found that it was can lights on the ceiling of a theater that we were in that just barely caught the reflection from her camera flash. But we wouldn't have saw that or wouldn't have known that if we hadn't taken so many other pictures at other angles to see that.
Awesome. Now, one last question, because we are getting close to the end of our time. Do you think you'd be okay with coming back sometime so that we can have you as a consultant for any future episodes if we're talking about ghosts or really anything else that falls into your expertise?
Oh yeah, I would love to. That would be fun.
Awesome. And if you have any other stories that you want to tell, I'm sure we can always get you again and get some more bonus content. It's always really exciting to hear.
Yeah, I have tons of stories, and I do have some pretty good EVPs too. Some that we couldn't explain, and we have a really good photo that we captured once that we sent off to a couple different people online to try to have them figure out like what was this apparition, and nobody could figure it out. So yeah, I would love to come and share those stories and share those EVPs with you guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Bye.
We'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, Cal, Ben Turco, and Rudapillar. Bonus content will be available soon. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and let us know what future episodes you'd like us to do. And as always, have a magical day.